Hello, this is Perspectivas Latinas, a community service of CAN TV. I'm your host, Juan Carlos Hernandez. Today, our guest is Don Rossi, the president of Latino Art Beat. It is a Chicago-based organization that aims to inspire young people to develop their talent for the arts. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Juan Carlos, for having me on your program today. It's a pleasure to be working with another non-for-profit organization.
Well, thanks for coming out. Let's get into the history of this organization. Where did this idea come from, and why? What were those first days for Latino Art Beat like?
Well, you'll find this a little bit of an amusing story. Back in 1998, I was driving around here in Chicago in Douglas Park with one of my nephews, and he was just graduating from Curie High School, and he was an art major and getting ready to go on to art college. And as we're driving through the park, I asked him, I said, "What are you going to do this summer?" And he said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "I think I'm going to have a barbecue in my backyard," which wasn't the right answer that I was looking for. And I said, "Well, what's the purpose of this barbecue?" And he said, "Well, I want to get some of my fellow art students, and we're going to bring over a couple pieces of artwork and, have a barbecue and this type of thing." So as we're talking and we're in the park, I passed by this old pavilion on Ogden Avenue. And I looked at it and I stopped the car immediately. And then I kind of jumped on the grass and I went over there and I said, "Come on, let's take a look at this place." And he said, "It's an old pavilion. It's falling to pieces. It needs plaster. It needs paint. The swimming pool that used to be here is all decadent." I said, "Okay." I telephoned the park district the next day and I said, "You know what? You have a pavilion there in Douglas Park. Do you mind if we used it for an event?" And so the guy kind of laughed at me. He said, "Well, it's kind of falling to pieces."
He told you the same thing.
Yeah, the same thing.
Yeah.
So I said, "You know what? Can you supply us with some paint or plaster? Maybe do you have it in your budget? 10, 20 gallons of white paint?" So we got a bunch of students out there over the course of the next couple of weeks, and it was warm weather, and we actually fixed up part of the pavilion. And my nephew is still wondering, why are we doing all of this? I said, "Well, instead of those 5 friends from your high school, we're going to go around to the local high schools in the area and just say, hey, bring out your artwork and let's see what happens." That is how Latino Art Beat was born. That first year, that first summer, and we did it around the 4th of July. We had 300 kids show up with their artwork. We had a couple folkloric dance groups that volunteered to go. And in the Hispanic community here in Chicago, if you say, "Let's have a party," everybody comes out.
Especially if there's food.
Especially if there's food. And we did have food. We had a restaurant that actually catered for us, and they donated the food. And as we were looking at all of the artwork, I kind of said, well, I think we need to pick out a winner, and then we'll give the winner something. So I had $300 in my pocket, and that was the prize money. So one kid got $50, and somebody got $25, and a bunch of them got $20. And I didn't realize it, but the Lawndale newspaper, which is quite a large Hispanic bilingual newspaper from Cicero, they were there. The following week, we're passing by and we see one of these news kiosks, and it says, "Latino Art Beat Success." We were front page. I couldn't believe it. And I said, well, we kind of only did this as a kind of a community thing, give my family
a one-time thing.
It was a one-time thing. I get a call from, Daley was the mayor at that time, from the Office of Special Events. And they said, "How would you like to do this again next year?" I said, What do you want me to do next year?" "Well, that event that you did in Douglas Park, the Latino Art Beat." I said, "Well, I don't think so." And he said, "Well, we'll give you stages, we'll give you entertainers, we'll set up tents, we'll even help you put up a carnival." And I thought, God, that's quite interesting. So we worked on it, and that was our second annual Latino Art Beat. We enlisted some of the local colleges to support our awards, and we got an airline to come in, et cetera, et cetera. And then we slowly built from that point, and we did consecutive art events in Douglas Park.
How many years?
We did them in Douglas Park probably for about 6 years, up to the point where Fox was running for president of Mexico.
Okay.
And this was kind of an interesting story also that ties into the beginnings of Latino Art Beat.
Everything just seemed to snowball.
It really did. You know, from a simple idea of having a backyard barbecue to an art exhibit in the park, and now we've got some communication with the office of this campaigner, Vicente Fox, who I didn't know anything about, and I said, Fox, it doesn't sound very Mexican to me, but Fox was coming to Chicago at the same time that we were going to put on our Latino Art Beat Hispanic Heritage Festival, as we called it. I had enlisted these particular Indian entertainers called the Voladores de Papantla. And they basically climb up a pole, they get to the top, they spin around, they have a rope tied around their waist, and they jump off.
Right, I've seen them.
Amazing.
Right.
So we were the first to bring it in Chicago in many, many years. I think maybe 15 years previous, another festival had brought them in. So I tell special events, we're doing this at the same time that Vicente Fox is going to be in Harrison Park. I said, I don't think we're going to attract any people.
I was there too. I was at Harrison Park actually when Fox was there.
Okay.
Interesting.
All right. So when Fox was finished, I had about 100 volunteers passing out leaflets, Latino Art Beat, Los Voladores de Papantla. We got a crowd of 22,000 people at our festival. 22,000 people. It's the biggest thing that we ever did. I never imagined that we were going to be that successful.
It sounds like you outdid Fox.
We did. We actually did. And I even got a call from the presidential palace from his forward people asking us to move the Voladores to Harrison Park. And when I spoke to Mayor Daley's office, they said, you can't do that. You already have a pole and everything is set up. So a couple years later, we got noticed by a major car company. And we had an old van, and Senator Munoz written off to a few car companies saying, this is a non-for-profit. They work with kids in the area. Could we get a donation of a van? Well, this car company donated us a brand new state-of-the-art van with video and DVD equipment and all of that type of thing.
Wow.
And our relationship grew to a point that they helped us take the program national. And today, from those meager...
and unplanned.
Totally unplanned. I mean, I wasn't planning on becoming president of a national scholarship organization, and never did I think that Latino Art Beat was going to become as famous as it actually is. And this car company did actually take us on a national basis. So today, we're not only in Chicago, we're in the entire state of Illinois, we're in Los Angeles, we're in Houston, we're in Miami, we're in Washington, D.C., and our newest partner city is New Orleans, Louisiana.
Wow. From that from that idea that you had on a lark that you just said, oh, you just pulled over, looked at that, and from all of that, now you're a national organization. I'm curious though, before we look at some, and we'll talk about how the scholarship program works, but I'm curious, why the arts? There's such I think, a mentality among many people that the arts can be a waste of time, or it should just be a hobby. It shouldn't be something we focus so much energy on.
I've heard that.
I'm sure you have.
I've heard that. One of the reasons for the protocol of working in the art, quite apart from the fact that we sort of stumbled into this innocently, I have to say, many kids strive to go to college but don't have the money. They didn't have the money 17 years ago, and they still don't have the money today. Tuition keeps going up, college costs, dorm costs, book costs, the cost of living away if a student actually goes away from their home base. Now, if you go into the sports arena, you will get every college I won't mention any names, but they heavily recruit sports kids.
Right.
Basketball, baseball, football, soccer, whatever else it is. At the point where Latino Art Beat went national, there were very, very few, you could probably count them on one hand, of arts colleges that went and campaigned and said, hey, we want to bring you in. And this was one of the main reasons that I decided that I wanted to give back to my community by encouraging more kids into the visual arts. And again, you'll say, okay, well, that's part one, but again, why the visual arts? Well, quite apart from the fact that these kids were sort of left behind, and now we were giving them an opportunity to actually go to college through the awards that we give to our winners. The fact is that there are so many different types of job careers under visual arts. Visual arts includes photography, for example,
Right.
advertising, models, all of this type of thing. It includes film. And we have a film division, which we'll talk about a little bit later in your
Right.
program. Drawing and painting. Car
Design.
companies, for example, need designers. They need engineers. And then when you talk about a lot of the kids, especially Latino kids, they like working with pencil and doing drawings. Now we have a path to architecture, to design. So when you think about it a little bit more deeply, art is in almost everything.
Wow, that's a great way of putting it. And I think we don't have the mentality or the vision to, I guess, to leave that canvas. We tend to think of art as the visual arts to be focused in on just the canvas when actually it branches out to so many areas. Now, let's look at some of the winners from this contest that you have every year. And like you said, you hold it in Houston, DC, throughout the state of Illinois, LA, and Miami. This one piece right here that we're looking at is from Houston. That was the national winner.
Yes, absolutely. Now, this young man took a chance and he submitted his artwork. Let me just back up for a second while you're showing some of these images. Our protocol is to work with the mayor's office in each city. So it's
Okay.
an official city program which is presented by the mayor and the city in collaboration with Latino Art Beat and the local Department of Education. So what kids do, if they're in an art class or if they're not in an art class, they will submit their artwork to their high school teacher.
Okay.
The high schools then submit it to the Department of Education in their city. That department, with the mayor's office, judges and selects the winners.
Oh,
There'll be
wow.
a first place, a second place, a third place, and there'll be runner-ups.
Okay.
So this young fellow from Houston, Texas, who is our current national winner, submitted his artwork to Cesar Chavez High School within the Houston Independent School District. And our judges thought that there was so much innovation in this piece of artwork. He's putting his finger through sort of like another dimension. So he's reaching out from his mundane life into something a little bit more
Right.
outstanding. And he luckily will be awarded a substantial scholarship when he graduates. He's actually graduating this summer.
Okay.
And we have a basket of academic partners, and those partners offer our program winners scholarship support.
Wow. That painting with that young man's, I guess, skinning his hand into another dimension reminds me of like the Matrix, or that kind of taking chances, I guess, and these artists certainly are taking chances with their own work. And you're taking chances by expanding the program, right? You recently, you started working more actively in the city of Miami, right?
Yes, we have. We have.
And we have a piece from the winner of Miami, right?
Yes, you do.
And that's the name of that is Hibiscus Made, and that's by Maria Gonzalez from South Miami High School. Now, how did that relationship develop, and how did that now take you into Cuba?
Well, each city, as we say, we select certain winners. And then all of the first place winners from each of the participating cities come up to Chicago. And then in Chicago, we select a national winner. Now, that national winner will get an additional scholarship award, which generally is another $10,000 on top of whatever they got as their award from the local cities. So to become a national Latino Art Beat winner is quite a big thing for our program. And unlike a lot of other organizations, even some Hispanic scholarship organizations who give smaller scholarships, $500, $1,000, we decided to give substantial scholarships, but to fewer students to make all that difference. Now, year after year, in the beginning days when we started working with Miami-Dade County Public Schools and the mayor of Miami's office, we would get national winners from Miami. And it would hit one year, and then the second year, and then the third year, and then we'd go to maybe Los Angeles and maybe Chicago, and then it would go back to Miami. Until I finally said, you know, there's something going on down there in Miami. These kids are so talented. They're taking our national. We gave out substantial scholarships to Miami students. As a matter of fact, I think we've given out more money to Miami kids than we've given out to any other city. And we're talking about in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And even though you're based here.
And we're based here.
Right.
We're based here. And from that day when I only had $300 in my pocket, if you remember earlier in the interview, we're now up to awarding over $4 million in scholarship support to these kids.
That's significant.
It really is. So as I dug deeper into why Miami and why not Houston, why not Washington, D.C., why not Chicago, my home base, there is a tremendous Cuban-American population, which we know, obviously, since the 60s when the Cubans started coming over to the United States to escape the revolution that went on between Batista and Fidel Castro. I started looking closely at these winners. Many of them were Cuban American, or they were Cuban Colombian, Cuban Venezuelan, but there was a Cuban connection. So it finally got to me, and I was sitting down with the head of public schools down there in Miami, and I said, you know what? I'm going to Cuba. I want to figure out what is the heritage, what are in the genes of these kids that make them so talented? And that's what inspired me to take my trip 2 years ago to Cuba.
Tell me about that trip. What was it like? Had you been there before?
Well, it was rumored in my family that I was in Cuba when I was 5 years old, but I'm so old now I don't remember it. But I would say that was my first official trip to Cuba, and I did go properly on a government license.
You didn't go through Mexico or Canada?
No. I got on a plane in Miami, and 45 minutes later, it was like going to another world. Coming from Miami and all the life and the color and the ambiance, etc., and then getting to Cuba, where I didn't see any new cars, and there are 1940s and 1950s brand American cars on the streets there, and just the whole thing was like going back into time. But it was fascinating to see the resolve of the people in Cuba and how they've managed to survive on their meager incomes and on recycling car parts to keep them going and to do their little side businesses so that they can make money. I mean, that's from the socioeconomic side.
Right.
But from my perspective of being, involved in the visual arts and in higher education, I was very keen on going to high schools, colleges, universities, art schools, etc. And the Cuban government allowed me a free hand to go to any school that I wanted to go to, and they facilitated my visit. And once I got into the schools, I then understood what was deeply ingrained within the Cuban culture and the heritage, and art and music and dance, the performing and the visual arts are very, very big part of their cultural background.
Right, it's not seen as a hobby or something to do for fun.
No, as a matter of fact, they have dedicated universities to art. And I was talking to kids 14, 15, 16 years old who were superior artists doing architectural designs, doing renderings of the body and the internal organs to such a point that you thought you were looking at a photograph and not a drawing.
Wow. That is outstanding. And do you plan to return to Cuba anytime soon?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, I'm now negotiating to do an art exchange between young students in the United States and young students in Cuba. It seems as though we have the green light from the Cuban side. I was able to meet with the head of their organization called UNIAC, which deals with artists and writers and things in the music industry, and they're very keen on seeing the program happen. And I'm very keen, as an American, as someone involved in higher education, to show both sides that through people-to-people exchanges, you can make a difference.
That sounds awesome. And you have so much going on, and I wish we could talk actually for an entire show on just your experience in Cuba and developing that relationship. But you're also branching not just you're out to other cities or other countries, but also other types of visual media, and you're now working more actively in film and awarding film students. Tell me about that.
Well, for our first couple years, we concentrated on drawing, painting, photography, and what we would call the 3D arts, which would be sculpture and handicrafts and that type of thing. But we realized that, hey, we're missing the point here. Because if you talk about education to careers, we know that all of these kids are not going to become the next Salvador Dali or the next Picasso or the next Leonardo da Vinci. You know, those are rare opportunities. Or they're not going to become the next Andy Warhol, who painted things and sold them for $10 and now they're going for millions. So we wanted to now focus on other parts of the visual arts that could actually inspire careers. And that's where we decided, okay, let's get into film. And when you say, well, film, I mean, are these kids going to become movie stars? Or are they going to become, directors? Well, there is such a gamut of job opportunities within the film industry. You have cinematography, you have direction, you have art direction, you have costumes, you have acting, you have script writing, you have stories. So we started our film and animation division several years ago. We were quite successful. And we started giving scholarships to film kids. We encouraged some of the universities around the United States that have film departments. For example, here in Chicago, we have Columbia College Chicago, which has been a very faithful partner of Latino Art Beats for the past 15 years. And now we've switched from an academic partnership with them to a collaborative partnership.
Wow.
So we're able to offer these film students real opportunities at higher education within the film industry by putting them into schools and colleges that specialize in this industry. Now, what did we do recently?
Right. Tell me about that.
To make things even more interesting for these kids? What we did is we decided to make our first independent movie. And you might say, Latino Art Beat is now a filmmaker? Yes, we are.
Okay.
What we did is we got a collaboration between former Latino Art Beat winners and current students that attend one of our academic partner colleges. In this particular case, we got most of our students from Columbia College Chicago, and we got a couple of our sound students from the Los Angeles Film School out in Los Angeles, California. So it was a collaboration. And again, one of my young nephews, who's in the studio today, actually wrote about 300 stories, Manny Reyes. And Manny wrote some very interesting, scary stories for young kids. So I said, you know what, Manny? One of your stories is going to become a movie. Of course, he didn't believe me, and he said, well, yeah, okay, that's my dream. Well, it actually happened, and we produced a movie called Visiting the Museum, which is an 18-minute short. We had a collaboration with the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago and Columbia College Chicago. We put the film together, and it's just an absolute fascinating story for kids to see. It's about two young high school students, one Latino, one non-Latino, and a mummy.
And a mummy.
And there's a homework assignment on Egyptology, and the two kids go off to the museum. They study Egyptology. The one kid who's a little bit more mischievous actually runs across a mummy that's being prepared for display. And he's got a little bit of a dark side because there's got to be a scary part to these stories to interest younger kids. And he brings the mummy to life.
And then what happens? Or should we see it?
You need to see the film. You need to see the film. Now, we were very lucky because this film was distributed all over the United States. It has made many film festivals. It was premiered here in Chicago at the Oriental Institute, and then Classic Cinemas, who own quite a few cinemas here in Chicago, actually screened it at their beautiful location in Oak Park, Illinois. And the most recent screening I actually did aboard a ship off the coast of Greece. 4,001 passengers, and they saw it visiting the museum.
And what was the reaction?
The reaction was, when is part 2 coming out? So we're now working on part 2, but it won't be about a mummy. It'll be another scary story.
Okay, I'm curious. We're running out of time. How do those collaborations work, where you have people here in Chicago doing one thing and people in LA doing another thing? Like you said, the filming took place here at the Oriental Institute at the University of Chicago, but the sound was being worked on in LA.
Absolutely.
How do you
and this is typical in the
that?
film industry, where you would have sound editors off campus.
Okay.
In this particular case, it was very off campus. We had 3,000 miles distance, but because Latino Art Beat has a presence in Los Angeles and it has one in Chicago, it was quite easy. It was like LA is our suburb and we're going there. Now, an interesting thing is when you do an independent movie, you have to have original sound. Otherwise, the film festivals are not going to pick up on it. So
violating the rights of
copyrights and royalties and all of that type of thing. So this young group who was on X Factor, and they're called Emblem 3, and a lot of your young girls that are listening to this interview today will know who they are. I actually encouraged them to do an original song, and they did the soundtrack for it. So now, because they have become so popular, they have brought up also the popularity of our film, and if you go to iTunes, you can actually download the soundtrack.
Okay, we're really running out of time now. We just have a minute or so left. What are your hopes for this organization that has grown by leaps and bounds, and in some sense, unplanned? I'm sure you have a plan now.
Well,
as quickly as you can.
We continue to forge more partnerships. We now have a partnership with Holly Short's Film Festival in Los Angeles, California, where our film winner will get a $10,000 scholarship, and their film will be screened at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood, California. With our other partnerships, we continue to increase the scholarships, and I would love to see this as a truly national program and be able to offer it in all the major cities in the United States.
Really? And besides going national, does that mean you're also increasing the awards you're giving?
Absolutely. It's all about sponsorship. We're non-for-profit, as you know, so we're always soliciting, people that want to support communities and come back in and say, okay, we love what you're doing, let's support it.
Thank you so much for coming out today and sharing so much of what you do.
My pleasure, Juan Carlos. Thank you so much for having me.
Perspectivas Latinas is a community service of CAN TV. If your nonprofit organization would like to work with CAN TV, call 312-738-1400 and ask for nonprofit services. Tune in to Perspectivas Latinas for local issues and concerns every Thursday at 8:30 p.m. on CAN TV 21. I'm Juan Carlos Hernandez. Thank you for joining us.